Doe ons nog een vers lezen, niet?
Hij wordt reden van Abraham en ik wil een vers gelezen en hij heeft nog Genesis chapter 22 wat hij over reden. Ik wil hier nog een vers lezen van Jakobus kapitel 2 vers 23. Dat zegt ze ster. In zo wordt dort, zoals de schrift zegt. Abraham gelooft God en dat wordt aan als gerechtigheid ongerekend en hij wordt God zijn vriend genannt. En dan die was Genesis 22. Thank you.
Okay, well, English or German? English? German. Ja.
Ik wil maar zeggen, ik wil niet tegen je zeggen, ik voel me wat je wilt, als die hier was Duits reden, dan dacht ik, die wilt dat is anders, maar ik wil niet tegen je zeggen, want ik voel dat ik goed. Als je weer, ik had niet vergeten te praten.
Well, I mean, that kan het han weer aanstal.
Okay, now they just
If there are people that are German that really prefer that, then I can go German. English is always easier, but du gleich dat tegen, but you gleich dat een beetje tegenonder.
What's that? That
You-
will I cool, right? The hit it be, right? Oh, no, the ass hit it, right? So then just whatever you know, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Jeg kon det Duits forstod engelsk, og bare engelsk kunne vi nok godt forstå.
Maar wer kan beter Engels verstaan als Duits? Okay? Yeah, one of each. Okay. Several times in the scriptures, Abraham is referred to as God's friend. And it was probably a couple of years ago, and to me it just sort of like, it's not that I hadn't ever read these verses, but it was kind of like, wow, Abraham the friend of God. And in 2 Chronicles, I think it is, where it talks about God will give the land to his friend Abraham. And I started asking the question, so what makes you the friend of God? Or what did he do that he would be the friend of God? I mean, that's kind of cool, right? We'd all like to be the friend of God. But that the Bible actually refers 3 times to Abraham, the friend of God. And so what I did is, I went through the life of Abraham, and I started looking. What is it about Abraham that God said, this is my friend? Zie wat we zien leven dan bij ons de lijn gaan. En zeggen, leeft hij zo gans krijgt ohne Fehler, dat God op eenmaal zegt, dit is mijn vriend. En dan, wenn ich das Beste da habe, checke das, wir lachen nicht so. Wir sind nicht das von Abraham ohne Fehler wir. So wir nicht dort. Aber da muss something sein, dass er Gott sein Freund wir. Und so, nu hat mir das Ding noch anschlugen. So, wat leef je, wat meint dat een vriend te zijn? What is a friend?
Somebody
That's
that's there for you.
there for you, okay? That we could define what that exactly means, but Nehemiah, what's in friend?
True friend will remind you if you goofed up or would take it from a friend.
Yeah. I was in a meeting in Ontario one time, and there was probably about, well, there would be more guys than this. I think it was an men's event, if I'm right. What? No, not necessarily. Maybe it was a missionary staff event, probably. And there was a native fellow in the group, Dina Lotsfield. What would you do?
Point it out.
You would. Yeah. I noticed one of his close friends, which I would have considered one of his close friends. Op eenmaal en weer die we bezieren bij hem schoten. Dan had het geändert. You know, and I thought, maybe that's a real friend. Nu steed we bloos een beetje onverwacht kijken en zo weer. We're too embarrassed to say anything. A real friend probably just goes and says. Maybe that's what it means to be there for you. Nog maar ja. A real friend is somebody who, just example what I call him, whatever, but I think that is one.
Spends a lot of time with you.
Yeah? Generally, that's what it happens, right?
Doesn't the Bible say that a real friend would be willing to die for you?
Okay, yeah. Do you guys have friends?
I would say friend for me it's to have fellowship with.
Okay, okay. I was wondering, like, do you guys have friends? There's such a like friend, and then there's a close friend. I think it's different. Eh? A Noah friend. Or ek draai manchmal ek al een friend. En ek zie dat manchmal hier, en dan zie ik nog een onderschoot, en dan zie ik nog zes, en dan staat nog een verschillende friend. And that's a type of friend, but then there's another type of friend. And I had a very close friend growing up. Later, I haven't always had so much, but growing up, I had a very close friend. And we'd spent lots and lots of time together. And I'll tell you a little bit of his story tomorrow. But he went through significant loss, and it shaped kind of who we were, I think. But sometimes we ask, like, how can we tell if this person is my friend? And what does he do to be my friend? John in the New Testament talks about being the friends of God. And then he says in John 15, you are my friends if you do what I command you. So John says to be in obedience. God no follow you, to listen to him. That is part of that. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Oh. Instead, I have called you my friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. Oh, okay, so one is obedience, and het andere heeft te doen met, you know everything that I know, kind of, right? So there's those communication, there's some good sharing, there's some good camaraderie. Daar had je ook niet een Duits woord voor. Yeah. So obedience and open communication. They shared everything they learned. You know my life, you know my mission, you know my heart. In our case, my friend knows probably my struggles. He knows my heart. It's somebody that you can probably say that asmas a statement me. Abraham, and here's a few things about his life. He seemed to be very committed to journey in a relationship with God. To journey in a relationship with God. Op 'n reis met God op. Right? God krood hem, Ur of the Chaldees, uit dat land, uit dat culture. De krood gaat hem uit en reis naar Herren. En daar blijft hij stil zijn en sterft zijn vader daar. Dan op zijn nephew met en dan trok hij weer. En dat zit dus van hij, zit me dat means, with altars and prayers and worship and honesty, he journeyed into Israel with God. En op verschillende steden had hij stel, maakt hem een altar, sort of renews his commitment, De nästa månad was ik verstopt, and then var det vidare. So there seemed to be that journeying with God. I think he shared his disappointments with God. And then he had seasons where it's just phenomenal, the amount of faith he had. Right? To go into a strange land, and he was just listening to God. But he's listening to God. So incredible faith and trust. Wat hij had, is hij dan wieder reizen deed. Bij hij reizen maar met God hoop. And always in constant awareness what God zijn wel would for arm zijn. So we were playing on and living relationship with him. And I think even his farming, he seemed to have his farming decisions attached to his faith. If you go through it and you watch how he farms and how he does his farming partnerships, you'll see some of that. There was a deep trust in him as he journeyed and walked with God. And he takes Sarah along. One question what I had, and that Dietje han mag best i trubbel, and dan hies ik me mag so die måndag var när vidare träck and the fru var like gå ihop hej träck plus, and then champs him out. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but sometimes I get a little bit that impression that the guy has this dream and then he wants to go and then he's gone and the fru is anja don de champ han mat. How about Sarah? Did when Abraham moved, did Sarah always come along and did music valig? So I went looking, and then, and then in the New Testament, in 1 Peter chapter 3, there's a reference there that Sarah seemed to be in deep devotion to Abraham. In the English Bible, it talks about Sarah called Abraham Lord. So that leidt zo dat zij eerd aan, en zo een klein beetje zij weer met aan top. Because the Hindu is like, if you read 1 Peter 3, you'll find that Sarah had a deep respect for Abraham. And dan zegt de schrift, and guys, be respectful to your wives. Because if you're not, your prayers will not be answered. And so I'm assuming that Sarah was with Abraham. Because Peter says Sarah had respect for Abraham. And guys, be respectful to your wives if you want your prayers answered. So I'm going to say Sarah was with him in his journeys. Well, when they had famine in the country, right? Then Abraham went to Egypt. I'm not sure if that was an oops. To me, it feels a little bit like God called him to Israel, and I worked at the Drich, and then he went to Egypt. It doesn't say that he shouldn't have. I find it a little bit strange that he did, because ik dacht God had him naar Israel geroepen. Now, voor in Egypt, en hij had zo'n gruwelijk smakke momentje, ook zoals you guys. Nee, en we hebben zo ons aan je met angst, dat deze guys willen zien een momentje willen gaan. Nou willen ze hem doodmaken en zien een momentje nemen. And then he was so scared, and I'm bereid around what say blood side that says seen disaster. Now word. But guys, think about it. If she is his sister, I have seen leven nu saved, but how about her? That she will be taken for a wife and be gone, right? But I'm dacht hij niet aan dat. Hij had zich zelfs verstaan. I mean, that's totally true. Dat nu wordt ze arm niet brukken dat maken, because ze kunnen bezien disaster nemen en vrije zich daar en dan weer het alle goud. Dan kan hij wat eten kleven. Opa, how about her? And as the story goes, nee, dan noemen ze haar ook, nee, en dan gaf je dat aan het, en dan gaf ze het terug. But to me that was an oops. Daar denk ik wat veel wat niet in orde meer. Whether the move was right or not, I don't know. Well, he farmed with his nephew Lot. They were in a farming partnership. The Old Testament has really quite a few farming partnerships and farming stories, and I always like those farming stories. And Abraham is no exception. He had a farming story because he took his nephew Lot along, and then he tried to farm with him. And that mag maar sjofte niet alla säga fan av ett giok. But here, Abraham seemed to be very gentle with his nephew. He seemed to be careful. And then when Lot, or when his nephew started fighting with Abraham, and the oberas nicht vor die horde, einer mit dem anderen, right? Then Abraham goes and says, listen, we are family. We're not going to fight. If you want that land, I'll take this, and if you want this, I'll take that. Lot, the greedy guy he was, he wanted the green and the nice pastures. And what does Abraham do? Okay, then you can have the nice pasture, and I'll take the desert. I think that's impressive. Men det är separate and fred. Abraham not with 3 land. And I think Abraham said, God will take care of me. God called me here. Nu har jag det stoff I kräver in det 3 land. God will take care of me. It'll be okay. And well then, of course, Lot gets into trouble, and there's 4 kings that fight another 3 kings, and Lot and his family gets caught in this whole conflict and the war, and he's being taken captive, as a refugee, forced, and land. And what does Abraham do? He calls his troops together, and he goes after these kings, and he wins the war, and he brings Lot and his family all back. He risked his life for his nephew. Wat am då har på 3 stappen upp till jord. När gör den hänger on och krockar den 3. När bringt armen Lotten sina fruen de families and all the sina saker like det så och alla med 3 kom. Abraham had he had an honesty with God that I have to admire. Dat hij op eenmaal open te gaat en zegt dat het champ niet, de trof really niet beyond. Yesterday, in klimaatje van being disappointed with God, and Abraham was also one like that. He was a bit disappointed with God. God said, I will give you all this land, en ik wil die een zegen geven. And nothing happened. Nothing happened. Golf chains in. And I don't know if any of you are in a marriage relationship where there's infertility. Will you nicht chana chingaha? Parents like that, parents, I guess it's not parents, it's the lead. They struggle with that. It's very difficult when all your friends are having children and you can't. And Abraham, they couldn't. And God promised, you'll have a son. And nothing happened. Year after year, nothing happened. And we all know, ladies, when their time goes up, when they get so and so old, then they can't have babies anymore. And Abraham could see it. His wife was getting older and older, and finally she was old enough, she was past her childbearing years. En ik gaf hem nog gott, en dan God zegt hem nog, ja, det var nog någon junga. Finally, Abraham's like to God, no, it's not happening. It's not happening. God personally, as in some ways, God takes him out and he tells him, now look at the sky and count the stars. And God says, listen, you will have descendants like the stars of the sky. Lots of family will come after you. Abraham believed God. And then just a few verses later, then Abraham says, Nou, ik twijfel toch nog. About that land and that all that, like, wou ik dat actually kreeg? Then he tells God, I'm not sure. I can't quite get my head around this one yet. And then they have this contract, right? They have some animals, they kill animals, and then God makes a contract with him. Just affirms one more time that they will have a child. Well, weet je what? I think it's in the next chapter, chapter 15, where he says, I need more proof. Then God makes a contract, and then I think it's the next chapter. Abraham and Sarah make an agreement that they're going to have a baby with their children. Oh man, he just promised God. He just believed God. He just had a contract made with God. God just said, yes, you will have family that will be like the stars of the sky. And then he goes and he makes this deal with his chicks, and they're going to have a baby like that. Didn't I tell you? Abraham was not a perfect person. Well, they waited 10 years and it's just plain not happening. And then 13 years later, God promises again. Yep, you're going to have a baby. Well, Sarah's 90 years old by now, and Abraham's 100 years old. You know what? Abraham laughed when God said that, and Sarah laughed when she heard it. And maybe it was happiness, but I don't think so. I think it was like this is a joke. It's not happening. We zijn ring ons oude lied. Vi har för år i lut that you have changed. No. So they, to me that was another oops, where he had a crack in his faith. I don't know. Lots of Sweden van Zacchaeus reden. I made a comment that God likes or came for broken people. If Abraham was God's friend, like I said earlier, and you see this, I'm going to say that God is okay with broken friends. And if your life it feels like you have brokenness and there's cracks in your faith, you can still be the friend of God. God takes broken friends. Else he would not have called Abraham his friend. Abraham was a great man and a great man of faith, but there were cracks in his faith. There was cracks in his journey. God grows faith at least in two different ways. And one is when God answers a prayer very quickly. And some of you have had this, where you pray and the answer is there. And then you bless God for it. Some of you have had prayers that you prayed year after year after year before it happened. Like Abraham. Both of them grow faith. One is from the miracle. The other one is from the journey of faith, of prayer and relationship through over time. And I think God grows faith both ways. Well, then there was another very significant happening in Abraham's life, and that is when God asked Abraham now to sacrifice this son. See, all these years he waited and waited and waited and waited, and then he struggled, and then they finally got the checks involved, and then they struggled and struggled and waited and waited and waited, and then they finally had the baby at 100 years old. And then when the child was a number of years old, then God says, now I'd like you to sacrifice him. That made no sense. I'm not quite sure how to think about God's asking for that, but the Bible has it there, so we'll take it there. Well, Abraham takes the wood and the fire, right? And he goes to Mount Moriah, where later the temple stood. And he ties his son, and he's going to kill his son that he waited for all these years, and God promised and promised. And then finally he tried to help God out with his checks. And then he really had a son, and Sarah actually gave birth to him. Now he was going to sacrifice it. I'm going to suggest that when God looked off the balcony in heaven and he saw Abraham and his faith, that it was so foolproof that he would actually sacrifice the very son he waited for half his life, or at least a very long time. This guy had faith that's nicht to believe. And God stopped him, and God found him a lamb. But I think there was something that happened here when God saw that this man has that type of trust and faith. Maybe they could have a baby at 122. Maybe God could put him back to life. But Abraham so completely trusted God. And I just think that when God stood on that balcony, God says, yes, a true servant. Dis het die haft bloos diep tovertru. Dit's mijn friend. And there's reference to it, where that was very significant. Dat hij zo diep tovertru had, that he was willing to go there. Very, very deep. Against all odds, he was willing to do it. Yeah. James, the verse that the pastor read, talks about he believed God and it was credited to him for righteousness, and he was called God's friend. You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. I think what happened here is God said this guy's faith is real because it's nicht bloß wat sagt, it's what deed. His faith and his hands are attached. Dat's nicht bloß dat hij sagt, hij gelooft aan God, aber dat actually maakt een onderscheid. That's top connect. Very closely connected. So God says, he is my friend because this is connected. And so let me encourage us to have friends and to be a friend. Ek sê manchmal, if you want a friend, then you'll have to be a friend. And I'm going to make this observation. To be a friend, like Abraham, we offer deep trust and confidence. Like Abraham. Deep trust and confidence. And if you trust somebody, they will trust you back. Ik weet niet eens ik de mij zeg dat. Ik had een vorm van een Ukrainian guy en hij weet die iemand weet zo dat hij niet meer wist te wem hij really tof het had. En als ik dat land pachte deed van hem, ik trouw dat God dat hij dat niet heeft eenmaal verhastig beslist wil, want beheidelijk wie niet dat we weer een contract abschrijven, wie heeft dat niet nodig in. And so we never signed a contract, a rental contract. But we agreed, I don't know. No, ik weet niet dat we ever had opgeschreven. We agreed on when rent would be. Well, what the rent would be and when it would get paid. And so I remember the first time I came and I stood in his tiny little porch in his house and I handed him a check, and I think it was like 2 or 3 days before it was due. Whew! I knew I rented it to the right guy. I knew I rented it to the right guy. Ik had er niet meer aan je dacht ik niet meer betoeld. But he was that guy. He was a little bit suspicious and a little bit distrustful. En dan eenmaal weer dat Stein van zijn hart is, they ran, checked of him, put out fair teeth. Well, number of years later, he wanted to move to town, and so he wanted me to buy it, or he offered if I wanted to buy the farm. So I agreed to buy the farm. And so we went to the lawyer, and we were going to do the transaction. The lawyer asked Steve, what do you want for a down payment? And Steve says, nothing. En ik zei de lawyers in de Ugadate is de stit, en dan, what? Nothing. So dan schreef ik nog wieder, en dan 10 minuten wieder, oder dan maar dan, vraagt the lawyer, so Steve, what should I put down here for down payment? Nothing. Actually, I did it 3 more. Now, I was like, okay, Steve, I noticed you guys are getting along. But Steve, what should I put for a down payment? I told you, nothing. Zei ik to him lawyer. Dat wordt dus geschreven. You know what? I think Steve was finally my friend. He was quite a bit older than me, and he loved dogs more than he loved other things. He was kind to his wife, and she was harsh to him. And he was not a trusting guy, but somehow, over some time, I had gained his trust. A friend is trustworthy. We trust a friend, and so we offer trust. We get real and honest. Actually, that's important. Just like even my little illustration from Ontario. Op iemand dat we ganz honestly say, hey, we're completely honest. Or I have trouble. I have a temptation. It's private. China weet dat. But ik wil die dat say. Please pray for me. Because I'm struggling with this. And maybe it's stuff you watch. Maybe it's other stuff. But you can have a friend, you say, hey, please pray for me. I still remember doing that as a teenager to a little older guy that we kind of shared. And then, hey, you know what? I need your help. I think friends can be honest with each other. Abraham zei op iemand to God, I can't quite my glad that one young I can't. And then God had to take him out and show the stars. And yeah. And then, of course, our words and our actions, they're connected. Yeah. Our words are more than just words, but they have sacrificial action involved. Correct as Abraham. So there's really all other come, then he was willing to sacrifice his son. And friends, nee, mi champ dat kwai gezet uit die een raai geven, but you're my friend, ik wil die een raai geven. I'll sacrifice because I'm a friend. Make sure you have friends. And friends that you trust, friends that you can be honest with, and friends that actually make a difference in your way how you respond. Father, I want to thank you for this group of guys, and I know that they are friends and they have friends, and I pray that you would develop even more our friendship and in a way that we could also be honest with our friends and to share some of our struggles or temptations and to find help and extra prayer and encouragement, maybe even accountability. I know that sometimes friends agree that you call me once a week or you call me once a month and just see how I'm doing. And I pray that we could develop that kind of honesty in our friendships. Thank you again, Father, for being our King, our example, and I thank you that we have the story of Abraham that you called your friend, and we've tried to figure out what it is about Abraham that made him your friend, and we think we see that his faith was so closely connected to his hands that was one of the factors. Amen.
Thank you very much, Frederick.